Hey again, it's Mike the Gear Guy. Today we're replacing an axle seal on a Ramcharger, and I've done some of the preliminary stuff already. As you can see, truck sitting up on jack stands. Jack stands are under the frame. I've already got the wheel off and the drum off, and I pulled most of the bolts out of the differential cover. Now, I'm not going to be able to see everything real good, but this will just give you a basic idea of what's going on. All these bolts come out, and I always leave one in at the top, because in order to separate this, get you a good little flat chisel, one that's kind of flexible, and a hammer. And you're not going to beat on it, you're just going to tap on it. What this is going to do is separate the seal between the gasket and the pan cover. Make sure you have a decent drain pan underneath it. Now with that bolt up there, then you know once it breaks the seal, it's not just going to fall off and splatter oil everywhere. But this way, as you can see, pull the pan out a little bit, let it drain, as you can see down here. Let it drain a little bit. Once it's drained a little bit, take your hammer, chisel, set it off to the side. You're not going to need it anymore. Hold the pan in place, pull the bolt that you left up in there. Now when you pull the top bolt, this top bolt holds this brake line. Pull the top bolt first before you pull any of the others. Then you can take the brake line and slightly move it up out of the way so you can get to the other two bolts on top. Once that's done, then you can pull the pan off the rest of the way and kind of set it off to the side. Now at this point, what you're looking at is the ring gears, the spider gears, the axle hold down pin, the carriers. What you're going to do is turn it so that the pin as you can see right there, the pin has a bolt holding it in. Now I may have made a mistake here. Yep, I made a mistake. I got the wrong socket. So y'all just bear with me while I climb out from underneath this truck and grab a short socket. Did you miss me? I'm back. Now the socket that you want is going to either be a 5/16 or an 8mm. Don't worry, they're both the same size. 8mm is equivalent to a 5/16. So once you put the socket on there, take your hand and just pop it a little bit, and you'll feel the bolt break loose. Now, at this point, I'm going to take and rotate it. It's kind of pointed down. And you want to unscrew the bolt out all the way. The issue is my ratchet is getting in the way because it's starting to hit here already on the carrier bearing. You don't want it to be hitting on the carrier bearing because then you can't get the screw out all the way. So bear with me. As you can see, I went and got a long extension along with my ratchet to unscrew this bolt out of here. Now, got the bolt unscrewed. Pull the bolt, and as you can see, it's got a long straight shank on it. Okay. Now I've seen many guys take a hammer and a punch this thing out. That's really not the right way to do it, because you don't want to take a chance on damaging anything. So what I do, try to get everything neutral. And you can usually wiggle it back and forth. There we go. Just have to work with it a little bit. And once you get it where you can grab it, twist it back and forth as you're pulling on it. And that will pretty much get it to where you can slide it out. Then what you want to do is you want to rotate down with it in there, because if you don't, the spider gills will get out of the line. Go ahead and slide it on out. And there's your pin without beating on it. You want to check it. Make sure it doesn't have anything out of the ordinary, any kind of strange wear or anything like that. Some of these will have a flat spot, either all the way down on either side or in a couple of spots. Those are designed in there. Now, at this point, you can take two fingers to feel the end of the axle, and then reach out here by the wheel, and you can push the axle in the rest of the way. In doing so, you can take a magnet and you can fish around to get out the C-clip that holds the axle in. Now, I know these aren't the greatest pictures, but I'm not the greatest video person either. And give you an idea what you're looking at up in there. See if I can get this right. You see, right there, you'll see the axle sticking out this way. Okay, then at that point, you're pretty much done up under here for now. You can feel around, make sure you don't have any metal chunks in the bottom, and look for any kind of silver or glitter in the bottom differential. You don't see that, then you're in good shape. Give me just a minute. Get my fat ass rotated around here. Alright. And while you're here, something else you want to look for. Look at these teeth. Make sure these teeth are not worn and sharp. If they are, it's time to replace them. Okay. Alright. Now we can go outside. and see what needs to be done from out here. Alright, get my camera angled right. There we go. Now you can see the axle and the brake shoes. Now at this point, grab the axle and you can pull it out. What you want to do is you want to look right here where the axle rides and the seal rides. Run your thumbnail across there and make sure it's smooth. That'll tell you if your axle's still good. Now if you want, bring it out all the way till just the end of the axle is stuck inside the seal. Use the axle to pry with. And the axle and the seal are both out. Wipe off my hands a little bit. All right. Now, as you can see, I've already pulled the axle and the seal. And you want to take a look at these bearings. Make sure that the chrome on them is not chipped or flaking anywhere. We're going to wipe this down. Now, I'm going to pause it here so I can clean this up. And when I clean it up, we'll come back to putting the seal in. Now, before you put your seal in, you want to make sure it's going to fit here and make sure that it's going to fit on your axle. And then right before you get ready to put it in, picture just a real thin coat of silicone around it. Because if you don't, it never fails, it will leak around the outside of the seal. Then you take your little piece of 2x4, like what I'm doing here. To knock it in without damaging it. If you're knocking it in, make sure it's going in straight by stopping every once in a while and taking a look. Okay? Just tap around that side a little bit. Take your clean rag, wipe off the excess silicone so it doesn't get where it's not supposed to be. Okay? Now, at this point, I left my sandpaper on the back of the truck. So hold on. At this point, take a piece of sandpaper and just go over the drum side of the brake shoes just a little bit, just to give them a little bit of gripping power. Basically all you're doing is you're knocking off the glaze that the grease put on there. Okay, get you a little closer shot here. So you can see it's all been cleaned up. All the grease is off of it. Got rid of the glaze on the shoes. Seal is installed. And it's ready to start going back together. Now, it's going to get a little hard to see. But sorry, I forgot to hit the record button. I've got the axle in, and I put the C-clip on there. I put the C-clip in by pushing the axle all the way in, put the C-clip on there, and then push the axle out till it stopped. Now, we take the little axle bar and start it back in. And once you start it back in, you want to make sure that the bolt hole lines up with the bolt. Okay, we'll make sure it goes from side to side, not top to bottom. Push it back up in place, and I'll be darned, I got it all lined up right. I usually take a magnet, hold it in place right there, because something that you want to do when you go to put this back together, let's put a little bit of Loctite on the threads of your bolt. Doesn't have to be a lot, just a little bit will do it. Okay. And take the bolt, and get it lined back up in the pin. Once it's lined back up in there, put the cap back on your Loctite. Take your ratchet. Well, as you can see, I can't quite get to it, so we're going to rotate it up here where it's a little easier to get to. Then start screwing it back in. You notice I'm just using a little quarter drive ratchet. I'm doing that because I don't want to over tighten it when I go back in there with it. Once you get it in there, you want to get it good and snug. And there, it's not going to come out. Alright, this point is where you start doing your cleanup on your differential here. Clean off the old gasket, and that's where your putty knife comes back into play. And we can clean off all the old gasket. Make sure you have a nice, clean, smooth surface. Okay. Once you get that done, wipe it all clean. You can take a little brake cleaner here and spray this if you want. In case you're wondering, to clean up the backing plate and all the axle grease off the brakes and the brake springs and all that, what I used was about 3 cans of AutoZone's brake cleaner. It works great. Then I took, after it was all cleaned up, I took a blowgun, blew it off, dried it up, and a little bit of sandpaper to the brake shoes. It's cleaned up and all ready to go back together. I'm gonna pause here. Okay, now we're back. A couple of things you may want to take a look at while you're in here. On the edge of the ring gear, there's a bunch of numbers. Most of them are part numbers, but they will also tell you what gear ratio you have. Now on this particular one, according to the tag under the hood, I've got a 9 1/4 rear end. It's limited slip with 294 gears. This is an open diff. It's not a 9 1/4. However, read the numbers here. It's got 2.94. Now I can verify that it's 294 by counting the ring, the teeth on the ring gear and the teeth on the pinion, and divide them, and it will tell me what the gear ratio is. So apparently we've got 294 gears, which is pretty tall gear for this truck. I would have figured something. Let's see here. See if we can find the tooth count. Just rotating it around, inspecting it, as well as looking for the tooth count. Well, right back to where we started. Two 6 and 85. Well, I'm not going to worry a whole lot about the gear ratio on this, because this rear end's not staying in here forever. It'll just stay in here while we've got the 318. When I change to the 360, I plan on having either a 9 1/4 Chrysler or a Ford 9-inch posi. So, get back to the job at hand. As you can see, I put silicone I cleaned up the pan, put silicone all around the edge. A lot of people say, oh, you're better off putting the gasket in there than doing the silicone. Well, they're probably right, but you know what? I've never had a problem running straight silicone. Well, you get this on there, set it up there, line up 2 of the bolts that are easy to reach, get them started by hand. One on one side, one on the other. And at that point, voila, you can let go of it and get the rest of the bolts started. Now the last bolt that you want to put in is going to be the one at the very top that holds the brake line. And the reason being, because the bolt on either side of them need to be tightened up. With the brake line in the way, you cannot tighten it up. Not without bending the brake line and taking a chance on kinking it. And if you kink it, then you started a whole new case of worms. So for right now, we're just going to get them all started. they have any Permatex on the threads, you want to clean off the old Permatex. And somebody's been in this before, because not only did this have a gasket, it also had orange Permatex on it, which they did not do from the factory. See, here's a bolt here with some orange Permatex on it. We'll clean that off. One of the reasons for starting all these bolts in 2 or 3 full threads before you put any kind of air ratchet on them or anything like that is because get them started 2 or 3 threads, then when you go to put your air ratchet or on them to tighten them up, if you have one, or even putting a regular ratchet, less chance of cross threading. Okay, now me, being a mechanic for 35 years, I cheat. And I cheat badly. I don't use an air ratchet. Oops, as you can see, the air hose hit my phone. Now, I've got all those tightened up, and as you can tell, I didn't put so much sealant on it, or Permatex, that you see it oozing out everywhere. I put a 3/8 bead on it, and then took my finger and spread it evenly all the way around. And that will do a couple of things. One, it'll do the surface evenly all the way around and get a nice coating on it so that whenever you do tighten it up, everything's covered. And by only using no more than a 3/8 bead all the way around, you don't have so much Permatex in there that it's oozing out inside the case or outside the case. Aha! I found an issue. Issue which has to be solved by a 1/2 inch with a swivel. Now, if you're one of those that has to get out the torque wrench for every little nut and bolt, more power to you. These bolts here are all tightened up. If I remember correctly, the torque specs are 12 to 15 pounds. I don't use a torque wrench on them, only because I've done so many of them over the years. Now, we have one other item to take care of under here. And I've got to hurry because the mosquitoes are starting to get to me. So let me get some fluid and we'll start putting fluid in it. As you can see, now we're filling it up. Pull the plug on the back, and I cut the tip off of the lid and put me a hose on there. And that way you can take the bottle, turn it upside down, and squeeze it to fill it with fluid. Now, I have run into an issue here, so I won't be showing you complete full, but I don't have enough fluid. So I'm going to end the video. So I've only got 2 bottles, and I actually needed a third. So I'm going to end the video like this. A third. Once it starts coming out of that hole, just stop. Take your plug. And put it back in. Once that's reinstalled, you can climb out from under the truck. Make sure your drum is clean of all grease. Take a little sandpaper and go around where the brake shoes ride. You can put the drum on, put the tire on, adjust your brakes. And not just one side, but both sides. Make sure both sides are adjusted. When they're both adjusted, set it down on the ground, take it out, drive it. Put 50, 100 miles on it. Look up under here and make sure that you're not leaking fluid from anything that you've done. Alrighty? You can always... Ooh. Nope. Well, I might have enough in there after all. Yep. Apparently I'm right at the bottom. Right at the bottom of the hole, which is where I need to be. So, take the plug. Work it back into spot. Then from here, clean up your tools, clean up your mess. Get all your tools, put them back where they belong. And I know my videos aren't 100% detailed, but some of the stuff